Today we have a very special guest joining us all the way from Imphal, Manipur, Somi Roy, who is the translator of his mother Binodini's work from the original Meitei Lol. He is the founder of IMASI, the Maharaj Kumari Binodini Devi Foundation in Imphal. He's also a film curator. He has curated for US institutions like the Museum of Modern Art, Film Society of Lincoln Center, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and Asia Society. He has written on movies, theaters, photography for Art Forum, Drama Review, the British Film Institute, and International Documentary Association. He has given talks at National Geographic Society, the Smithsonian, Harvard University, and the Royal Asiatic Society of London. And he has also taught at New York University and Manhattan Marymount College. His translation of Binodini includes Crimson Rain Clouds. This was translated way back in 2012. As you can see, I have it over here. And he has also translated the Maharaja's Household, a daughter's memory of her father. This was translated way back in 2015. And as you might have seen, he is a promoter of international polo in Manipur. And he works for the preservation of the Manipuri polo. So really, really excited to be having him in our show today. Wherein we'll be talking a little bit about him, and mainly today we'll be focusing on the latest translation of Bor Sahib Ongbi Sanatombi. This is the original book in Manipuri in Meitei Lol, and it has recently been translated as The Princess and the Political Agent. And you can look at that book. It's available in Amazon. Available both as a paperback and Kindle. So first, yeah, I'm so glad that you are putting your time and energy, which is truly a gift for all of us, to be reading about things which we wouldn't have read. So I know we are at time, but I want to take a couple more of your minutes of one of the project I'm doing. So I'm doing a project called 1001 Thagachari. Hello, welcome to Finding the Voices. Today we have a very special guest joining us all the way from Imphal, Manipur, Somi Roy, who is the translator of his mother Binodini's work from the original Meitei Lol. He is the founder of IMASI, the Maharaj Kumari Binodini Devi Foundation in Imphal. He's also a film curator. He has curated for US institutions like the Museum of Modern Art, Film Society of Lincoln Center, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and Asia Society. He has written on movies, theaters, photography for Art Forum, Drama Review, the British Film Institute, and International Documentary Association. He has given talks at National Geographic Society, the Smithsonian, Harvard University, and the Royal Asiatic Society of London. And he has also taught at New York University and Manhattan Marymount College. His translation of Binodini includes Crimson Rain Clouds. This was translated way back in 2012. As you can see, I have it over here. And he has also translated the Maharaja's Household, a daughter's memory of her father. This was translated way back in 2015. And as you might have seen, he is a promoter of international polo in Manipur, and he works for the preservation of the Manipuri polo. So, really, really excited to be having him in our show today, wherein we'll be talking a little bit about him, and mainly today we'll be focusing on the latest translation of Bor Sahib Ongbi Sanatombi. This is the original book in Manipuri in Meitei Lol, and it has recently been translated as The Princess and the Political Agent. And you can look at that book. It's available in Amazon. It's available both as a paperback and Kindle. And I want to share a few messages I got to start the show.
Kabi haibasidi aiba haibasidi siba naide makhoi mingsati adumak leihoragani adubu aibi Maharaj Kumari Binodini Devi Bor Saibong Bisanatombi si aina inau nau na mu mahau ama aina phongdok chaning base majai bungo Somi Roy na aigi puai bungo aingo aigi di puani aigi che kau haidina ibani sinu pa oira si haidana akoi ani khangna ba sakhangmai khangna giban mitu dai mana su mache gumna khali aduga mahakna magi punchi gi ojaba kaya thadoga mama gi jamakta ngasi Bor Saibong Bisanatombi bu asugumlaba mamalyamlaba like se इंग्राजीदा अनुवाद तौबीदुना फोंगलगनी हाइबसि ताबदा ai ngamkhai leitana nungaijai maramdi prithibida leiriba mipung khuding makki maphamda aikhoigi sahitya se thungba yoba ngamdribani huji khamba thoibi mamangda aikhoigi doctor na handopi khre handoktana इंग्राजीदा khoi khamba thoibi se khoi leigre atopasing di Amerika aduga Russia ate lam punamakta pamba khoi mitrabakta leiriba chasingna leibiriba singse si khoi loina thungkhre adubu Bor Saibong Bisanatombi su masi phonglaba matungda phonglaba matungsida punamakki maphamda khoi sahitya se yaukragani haibasigi khanba maktada aina ipwa Somi Roy bu ngamkhai leitana imagi nungsibagi mamalyam labal imagi nungsibado nahakna phangba ngamjare nahak imagi atmana nangbu soi dana lairabakta penbiramgani nahakpu matam punamakta mangonoiba oisanu haidana isena nahakina phamda aina thamjari miyami maphamda so aina thamjari.
Next, I have a message from Jamuna Advani from California.
This is the book Bor Sahib Ombi Sanatombi by M.K. Binodini. I read about 40 plus years ago and I enjoyed it. And again, I got this copy of this book recently and I read second time after 40 plus years later and I thoroughly enjoyed again. But recently, Mr. Somi Roy, son of M.K. Binodini, he has contacted me about the translation of this book, The Princess and the Political Agent. And when I came to know about it, I was very happy and I got it as soon as it came out in e-book and I read it. He has done an excellent job with the translation because the original Manipuri language, that beauty in that is still maintained by him, and I assure you, you will enjoy reading that book, the Princess and the Political Agent, and you learn lots about the history of Manipur, the culture, and the politics in the palace, and you not regret it. Regarding the involvement of the princess and the political agent, you'll have to read this book. Then only you'll enjoy thoroughly. I recommend it.
Next, I have a message from Nancy McCardle Yambem from New York, America.
Good morning. Thank you, Monica, for having me, and hello to my dear friend Somi. I am thrilled to be able to say a few words about Imase today. I met Imase at our first Nama convention many years ago and was able to travel to the Adirondack Mountains with her, where she participated in an arts camp or retreat there. She loved her arts and she loved sharing them and promoting them and did a phenomenal job as a woman of her generation to be able to influence that generation and many generations to come with so much beautiful art that would not be available, would not be accessible without her. She loved nature and being outside, and I always gifted her with a calendar when we came to infall, and she just loved seeing us and catching up with us, and she really influenced me in my life. I consider her a Wonder Woman of the Eastern world, and I have several people who are Wonder Woman of the Western world to me, who influenced me, but she was a mentor and an influence in my life, and I just will never ever forget all she did and how loving and graceful and caring she was to me and to my husband Jupiter, and I will always remember and cherish her. Thank you.
I have a message from RK Nayansana from Manipur.
ꯑꯩꯒꯤ ꯏꯆꯦꯝꯁꯤ ꯋꯥꯡꯒꯣꯟ ꯁꯅꯥ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯅꯗꯤ ꯏꯃꯥꯁꯤ ꯕꯤꯅꯣꯗꯤꯅꯤ ꯃꯍꯥꯔꯥꯖ ꯀꯨꯃꯥꯔꯤ ꯕꯤꯅꯣꯗꯤꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯃꯌꯥꯝ ꯅꯨꯡꯁꯤꯅ ꯁꯣꯟꯅꯕꯤꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯏꯆꯦꯝꯁꯤ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯑꯉꯥꯡ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯤꯉꯩꯗꯒꯤ ꯇꯨꯡ ꯏꯟꯖꯔꯛꯄ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯂꯝ ꯀꯌꯥꯗ ꯃꯇꯦꯡ ꯄꯥꯡꯕꯤꯔꯛꯄ ꯑꯗꯨꯒꯨꯝꯕ ꯏꯆꯦꯝꯁꯤ ꯂꯝꯖꯤꯡꯕꯤꯔꯝꯕ ꯑꯁꯤꯅ ꯏꯔꯛꯄ ꯋꯥꯔꯤ ꯃꯆꯥ ꯅꯣꯚꯦꯜꯅꯆꯤꯡꯕ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯒꯤ ꯃꯅꯨꯡꯗ ꯕꯣꯁ ꯁꯥꯍꯦꯕ ꯑꯣꯡꯕꯤ ꯁꯅꯥꯇꯣꯝꯕꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯈꯪꯅꯔꯤꯕ ꯑꯗꯨꯒꯨꯝꯕ ꯅꯣꯚꯦꯜ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯥꯍꯤꯇ꯭ꯌ ꯑꯦꯀꯥꯗꯃꯤ ꯑꯦꯋꯥꯔꯗꯁꯨ ꯐꯪꯈ꯭ꯔꯕ ꯑꯁꯤꯒꯨꯝꯕꯁꯤ ꯃꯆꯥ ꯏꯕꯨꯡꯉꯣ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯁꯣꯃꯤ ꯔꯣꯏꯅ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯟꯁꯂꯦꯠ ꯇꯧꯕꯤꯗꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯃꯌꯥꯝ ꯂꯩꯕꯥꯛ ꯑꯁꯤꯗ ꯅꯠꯇꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯃꯥꯂꯦꯝꯒꯤ ꯑꯇꯩ ꯌꯨꯔꯣꯄꯤꯌꯟ ꯀꯟꯇ꯭ꯔꯤꯁꯅꯆꯤꯡꯕ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯅꯁꯨ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯄꯥꯕ ꯐꯪꯅꯅꯕ ꯃꯅꯤꯄꯨꯔꯒꯤ ꯇꯣꯉꯥꯟꯕ ꯇꯣꯞ ꯇꯣꯞꯄ ꯍꯤꯁꯇ꯭ꯔꯤ ꯑꯁꯤ ꯄꯥꯕ ꯐꯪꯍꯟꯕꯤꯕꯒꯤꯗꯃꯛꯇꯗꯤ ꯑꯩꯗꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯅꯨꯡꯉꯥꯏꯖꯩ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯃꯃꯥꯒꯤ ꯂꯃꯟ ꯁꯤꯡꯕ ꯑꯣꯏꯅ ꯃꯆꯥ ꯏꯕꯨꯡꯉꯣꯅ ꯈꯨꯠꯊꯥꯔꯛꯄꯁꯤꯁꯨ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯑꯐꯕ ꯈꯣꯡꯊꯥꯡ ꯑꯃꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯂꯧꯖꯩ ꯑꯁꯨꯝ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯏꯪꯂꯤꯁꯇ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯟꯁꯂꯦꯠ ꯇꯧꯗꯅ ꯂꯩꯔꯒꯗꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ MA ꯊꯥꯛ ꯐꯥꯎꯕꯗ ꯇꯝꯕ ꯌꯥꯕ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯅꯣꯚꯦꯜ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯛꯀꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯑꯁꯥ ꯇꯧꯏ ꯑꯁꯨꯃꯥꯏꯅ ꯃꯥꯒꯤ ꯏꯆꯦꯝꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯑꯇꯩ ꯋꯥꯔꯤ ꯃꯆꯥ ꯅꯣꯚꯦꯜ ꯀꯌꯥꯁꯨ ꯃꯊꯪꯗ ꯃꯃꯥꯒꯤ ꯇꯧꯔꯝꯕ ꯊꯕꯛꯁꯦ ꯃꯆꯥ ꯏꯕꯨꯡꯉꯣꯅ ꯍꯦꯟꯅ ꯈꯪꯕꯅꯤꯅ ꯃꯥꯅ ꯃꯊꯪ ꯄꯨꯊꯣꯔꯛꯇꯅ ꯇ꯭ꯔꯥꯟꯁꯂꯦꯠ ꯇꯧꯕꯤꯔꯛꯀꯅꯤ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯑꯁꯥ ꯇꯧꯏ
ꯃꯥꯅ ꯏꯅꯦꯝꯁꯤ ꯏꯕꯦꯝꯃ ꯊꯧꯒꯜꯂꯣꯟ ꯀꯥꯏꯕ ꯉꯥꯛꯄꯤꯒꯅꯤ ꯁꯅꯥ ꯃꯤꯡꯕꯨ ꯂꯧꯖꯗꯨꯅ ꯏꯖꯕ ꯑꯩꯅ ꯕꯣꯔ ꯁꯥꯍꯦꯕ ꯑꯣꯡꯕꯤ ꯁꯅꯥꯇꯣꯝꯕꯤ ꯀꯠꯆꯔꯕꯅꯤ.
Your Highness, my aunt, please forgive my breach of courtesy. I have taken your royal name. In this book I have written The Princess and the Political Agent. I dedicate to you. Here is a brief reading from the book. He had come in while Sanatombi and his friends were noisily busy in the shuffleboard court and said, "Is it true you all are going to play Kang? Royal elder sister, you may not play." "Why not?" "Because I'm telling you, you cannot." "And who are you? Should I stop just because you do not allow it? It's none of your business. I'm doing it. What are you going to do about it?" "You cannot do as you like." "And why not?" "I'm Prince Lukhoy, and I am Sanatombi. I am the male offspring. You are female." "What attitude, Mr. Male Offspring?" Sanatombi flared up in anger. It was true. She was a daughter. A daughter has no claim upon the throne at Kangla, but she did not accept this. She did not accept being told she could not do as she wanted. She did not know that her mother, who only had daughters, was not considered a blessed woman.
Sanatomina ahanba oina kang sanagadoribani konungda adubu onthokpa haibaduni Sanatombi yamna sauna mamai mamit ingangang maben sijada hangatlei samkhai masi lukhoi phu mana kang sanaba yade thini ngai hak leiraga wa launa da Sanatomina lukhoi da mayana chikle imai pe makamdongnia wafamdi asini Sanatombi kang sanabagi la langkhatlakpada lukhoi na thingi lukhoi Surchandragi taloi ngangbi na pokpani Surchandragi taloi ngangbi na pokpani haisingbi ngangbi ni piba supoi no manatraga no madi lukhoi kanglagi tangbal da phamlaba yai ningthaugi wakhal tawnariba lukhoi angang oirabasu masi mahak khangi mabu senariba wakhal thenba macha manaina angang asida tattana ningsingbi hi aduna mahak lamyamna henbani Sanatombiga thoina chahi hanade Sanatombina mamanaba singa kangsang dalang lingaida tanglaga hai nakhoi kang sanadawri haiba chumbra semsi sanaba yade karigi aina hariba sini yade nangna kari oirige nangna thinglaga aina hekta tokadaro nangina tholaite aina tawri sikajogege pangtaw tawba yade karigi yaroi ai lukhoi sanane ai su Sanatombi aina piba nangna ningol is haigaleda piba sidia Sanatombi mai hongna sawi achumbani mahak ningol kanglagi tangbal da ningol gi hak laite adubu mana ya ningde mana tawbada thingba ma ya ningde mahak khangde ningol popi mama kanana sulaibak phai haina de konungdana amuk hena soinai dabi nupi kari hena khenari bage.
So look at that, right? Like this book was written in 1976. So during that time, for a lady writer to talk about inequality, about even in the palace, how how women are portrayed or treated inferiorly, that says a lot, right? Like it highlights about the importance of male offspring, about how female are treated, and that strength is being shown in Sanatombi's character. All right, so let's give a big welcome to Somi Roy, whom I dearly call as Samo Somi Roy. Let's give a big Samo Bukrumjari. It is my greatest honor that we are here together today to be talking about your mom, whom I greatly admire, and for many of our listeners too. It's a great gift of literature, to the people of Manipur, not only to the people of Manipur, but to the people of the world, giving a glimpse about Manipur and putting a map of Manipur in the world.
Thank you. And I would also return the Kurumjari, but my hands are tied because I'm balancing my laptop on my knee. So I can't free up both my hands at the same time. But such a great honor to be back on your program. I've enjoyed it tremendously in the past. And therefore, I look forward to doing something on this different subject altogether, since we've done polo before, and now we can talk about literature.
Right, and look at this. I was looking at my collection, and see, I have all the books except the new one.
Ah, that was my the previous translation that I did, called The Maharaja's Household, A Daughter's Memories of a Father, which is my translation of Chirachan Maharaj Ki Imung, which was the last book that M.K. Binodini, my mother, wrote. And it is a book of memoir essays of life and growing up in the palace.
Right. And I read this, I was looking at my notes. Generally, I have some notes when I write it. And I read this way back, maybe, I don't know, 2000, it was translated in 2015.
That's right.
Right, and I remember getting it like almost immediately, and look at my handwriting, my old handwriting. I remember really like some of the stories or topic which spoke about women who bore sons were given like more higher treatment and things like that. So it really kind of portrayed our society of those time. But even now, it hasn't changed that much, though there has been a little bit of modern progress. Um, yeah, and then also it addressed about multiple wives, and how many wives are allowed. So I found that like very interesting. But I know today we are going to be focusing on the latest book, but I wanted to, share with all our viewers of all the other books. And look at this.
That was Crimson Rain Clouds, which was published
Yeah.
by Thema Books, and it is a translation of a play called Asang Banong Jadi. And this book was actually a little bit of an experiment because it was the first book that I was doing that included the translation as well as the original. And the original was in both Bangla script and in Meitei Mayek.
Yeah.
So it was kind of approached as somewhat of a learning tool as well for people who are not familiar with one language or the other, so they could go back and forth and read and kind of compare and make their own enjoyment and appreciation and even criticism to enable that. So there was also I also have a transliteration of that in Roman alphabet, which I still have not published, but I will.
Yeah, I should have put the order. Yeah, you're right. This was the first one, translated in 2012.
2012, yes.
Yeah, and as Tamo had said, all the three scripts are there in English, in Bangla, and in Meitei Mayek.
That's right.
And in Meitei Mayek. So yeah.
But these are the three
yeah,
books,
go ahead.
standalone books that I've translated of Binodini's work. I'm not really a translator of Manipuri literature as much as a translator of Binodini. And I have been translating Binodini since my college days. And my mother always used to make me translate. And I've always felt, oh, why do I have to do this? Being a kid at the time, but she liked my translations, and so she always made me do her translations of her short stories that were published also before in Sahitya Academy publications in the 1970s, before I left Manipur to come to the United States. So, and of course, screenplays for subtitling and so on. So I did a lot of translations for her of her work before I went to the US. And so these are the ones that I did after I started coming back on extended visits to Manipur in the 21st century, in the 2000s. So, so it's been a kind of a long journey, but the translation process has changed somewhat for me in the intervening years.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good call out that, you are a translator specifically only for Binodini's work, as you put it. So I just want to share this picture as we are starting. This is the self-portrait, and I really did not know that, like Imasi had painted herself.
Well, actually, it's not a self-portrait. It's a portrait of Binodini by her brother, Maharaj Kumari Binodini, who was the chief minister of Manipur and the builder of Manipur in the second half of the 20th century. So,
okay.
My mother was also a painter, but she said, "Well, I'm not such a painter as much as I am a sculptor." She preferred to be a sculptor rather than a painter. She said, "My sculpture is better than my painting," she used to say.
Oh, so I misunderstood because I was like, wow, I didn't know that because I've seen some of the sculpture, even when I visited your house. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that correction. All right. So I know we are going to deep dive with the book, but if we can, Tamo, we know about your translation work, we know about your curator work, about you promoting pony, but we want to know a little bit more about you and if you can share about your childhood, memories with your mom and, like you did share a little bit about the earlier translation. So if we can start with that.
I grew up here in Manipur, obviously. I was born here. My mother gave me a Tankul name, Somi, because I looked like a Tankul baby, I suppose, when I was born. Um, we studied here. When people in America ask me, what school did you go to? In America, by school, they mean the university or college, right? And I used to say,
Yes.
I went to Little Flower School. And they would say, like, what? I said, yes, you heard. I said, I'm a Little Flower graduate from a convent called Little Flower School, um, from which I studied there till about the third grade. Then I went off to boarding school in Darjeeling at a wonderful, quirky boarding school, very also American in its founding, called Mount Hermon. And there I left at the age of, I guess, 8, close to 9. And I was there until graduation for the next 8 years, coming back here. And so I've been away from Manipur for schooling and then for my graduation from St. Stephen's College in Delhi University. And I did my postgrad from Jawaharlal Nehru University in International Studies. So that's basically my educational life, so that my first 8 years of my life I was here, and then my next 8 years of my life I was basically in Darjeeling, coming back here, and after that another 8 years in Delhi. So um, I'm an ABD, and all but dissertation. I was going to do my research in Chinese politics when I was drawn to New York, and I decided to come to New York because I felt that I should be in the center of the world, as I put it to my mother at the time. So that was basically what I call my second phase of my life, where I spent more than 33 years in New York. I like to say that I came to New York rather than to the United States, because it was actually the metropolis that kind of struck my imagination and drew me. And I loved New York. I just kind of immersed myself the moment I stepped off the airplane, virtually. And so I was working there as a curator of film at a museum on Park Avenue called the Asia Society. And this was before film curators even quote unquote existed. We were called programmers. And I was I think the only Asian working at the Asia Society, which is a very Tony, very blue stocking Rockefeller established institution. But that gave me my training in cultural translation, because my job was to do film programs to educate Americans about Asia. And I basically worked with almost every Asian country, from Central Asia to the Philippines to Indonesia and Japan and so on, and India, doing programs. So we started the first all year round film programming, presenting films every week, which was kind of new. And then it became a fairly cutting edge program in New York, because it became the place where the new Chinese cinema, which had emerged at the end of the 1970s, after Deng Xiaoping had taken over in China, some liberalization happened, that the new Chinese cinema, which was the most exciting thing that was happening in world cinema at the time, was the thing that actually became the core of my work, because that was really what was happening in world cinema at the time. So I worked largely with China and with Taiwan and with Hong Kong, and then gradually from there to Korea and to Japan and then Southeast Asia. And fairly late in my career, I actually approached India. And we did Indian programs here. And from then on, as a curator of Asian cinema in America, I worked for other museums as well who had asked me to do exhibitions for them, like the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the Whitney Museum of American Art, and for which I did the first Indian American programming, what we call Desi Americans. And so we did fairly new cutting edge programs there, introducing Asian American programming to Asia Society, which was largely involved with traditional classical Asian culture. So being the only Asian at the time over there, and as an Asian American, I was actually involved in bringing out Asian American work into the mainstream of American culture. And my next phase turned out to be working with digital media in the late 90s and nonfiction forms. And so I started working with the Flaherty Film Foundation and the Flaherty Film Seminar. And so we did work on artists working with artificial intelligence and with interactive media and with the confluence of the media art forms of digitality that was coming over, addressing also the issues of the digital divide at the time. It seems so long ago, this is like in the late 90s already. But what was the most interesting thing for me in the later part of my career was my involvement with Appalachia. And here I began to find, around the same time that I started visiting Manipur, starting in 2000, a similarity of issues of regional culture, of small culture. How is Appalachian culture being portrayed in the larger mainstream American media? We had funny little sitcoms like the Beverly Hillbillies, for instance, which are kind of negative in their portrayal. And also the issues of Appalachia being a region that was seen mostly as distant, as isolated, good for resources, in their case being coal mining. So the distance from Los Angeles and from New York, and the natural resources that were being mined in Appalachia, and the Appalachians who wanted to hang on to the heritage in the face of this homogenization and the commercialization and corporatization of America, struck me as something that was very relevant to the Manipur experience that I was beginning to see and that I was beginning to experience. So coming back to Manipur and working on the legacy of M.K. Binodini Devi, my mother, has also drawn from all my experiences here. It's become basically a project over here, not really that different from what I was doing in America. I'm just happening to work with Manipur like I used to work with China or I used to work with Philippines, but through the lens of a local culture, of a distinct culture, of a regional culture in the larger world that was globalizing very rapidly, and with the homogenization that all the young people are facing, the challenges of the new century that India was living up to in the 21st century. These are all things that kind of came together. And so even translating a book like The Princess and the Political Agent, is very rewarding in terms of the thought processes of what are some of the issues that are facing smaller cultures in the world today, and what's going to be happening to the futures of the generations that are trying to keep an identity. And the question with identity then also becomes like, what identity? What are we going to be thinking about? Shall we remain insular and shall we remain self-referential? Or how do we deal with the outside world? And how do we see ourselves in the context of the outside world, whether it's the larger India of which Manipur is a part of, or India also is dealing with this issue altogether of what does it mean to have a new India, which is globalizing, which is after Y2K, has become a digital resourced country at this point. So these are all these issues that I feel that are part of my conservation work that I've begun to do in Manipur, whether it is polo or whether it is a translation of N.K. Binodini's work. It's all a part of an investigation into what is a culture and how do we present it, how do we look at it again, how do new generations revisit it or discover it if they haven't heard of it before, and what does it mean for us to look at our own cultures and our own literatures and our own writers and our own icons like N.K. Binodini. So that's basically a short, maybe long trajectory of what I've been doing.
Yeah, so when you said, right, like you were in New York and came back to Manipur, from what I am seeing, all this work were done when you came back to Manipur, right? But was that planned or it just happened because you were in Manipur? And why did you come back from New York and how all this project started?
It was very much planned. And it was because my mother was going through a rough patch in her life and wanted to get back into full-scale writing. And we had traveled to Java together, to Indonesia together, to Java and to Bali.
Okay.
Yes, I took her there, and it was a wonderful experience for her because the person who inspired her the most, Rabindranath Tagore, apparently went to Indonesia every year, and he loved Java. So everywhere she went, she saw the similarities between Java and Bali and Manipur. And I used to tell her, like, why do you keep talking about Manipur all the time? When we are here in Java, we're going to Solo, we're going to Yogyakarta, we're going to Bali and Ubud and all that. But her lens was completely through Manipur, everything. Just the dances, the sarongs, the Lesavis over there and the Lesavis over here. The way they wore their panics and the way they wore their sarongs, and so it was instructive to see her look at culture and the world through a very, very Manipuri lens. And I had been away for almost 20 years at that time.
Which year was this when you went?
This was in 2000. I was doing 2 seminars on documentary film and culture in Java, one in Jakarta and one in Yogyakarta, sponsored by the Ford Foundation. So I had taken a few filmmakers there, and I thought my mother, being a screenwriter and having worked in film, would also enjoy that. I had no idea that she would love Java so much. It's one of those unwritten books that she said she wanted to write an essay called The Island of Vishwakarma, which is her experience in Bali. All the carving, all the woodwork, all the bamboo work, the stone masonry that amazed her. So, so that was very instructive. And then in 2001, something called 9/11 happened, which completely ended all our lives. And since I was, basically a 5-minute walk from, I was living in South Street in the financial district, in the fish market, in the loft above the fish market on the Fulton Fish Market, and when 9/11 happened. And my office was only about, 20, 30 meters away from World Trade Center number 5. So we were in this epicenter of this thing that happened that upended all our lives. And following that, my father died. My father was a surgeon. He was the medical director of the state, a very highly regarded and professional doctor in Manipur, and Manipur's first FRCS from Britain and so on. And he died. And I thought, well, there are only 2 years difference between my father and my mother. So my mother is also approaching the end of her life at some point. And so I decided that I wanted to spend some time with her, get her back to publishing books, and to help get her life back together. And so I decided that I would do that on a personal, familial level. But also, I realized that of all the cultures that I've been working with, the dozen cultures that I've been presenting and investigating in New York and in the rest of America, because my exhibitions is to travel to about 30 different cities all across the United States and to other countries as well. The only culture that I had not really approached from my work angle and from my work interest was actually Manipur. So I decided to make Manipur a project that I wanted to investigate this culture in the same way that I had looked into Chinese culture after the Gang of Four had fallen and so on. Looking at the cultural evolution after 20 years. So that kind of thing I had been doing with other countries in Asia and also including India. But the only culture I had not touched was my own, which is Manipur. And I felt that I was so privileged that I was, by a stroke of good fortune, was the son of N.K. Binodini Devi. And I'd kept in touch with her, and people always wondered how come I speak Manipuri well still. I said, no, I'm the son of a writer, and we always talk all the time. And I'm also, as you can see, I'm a very talkative and talky person, verbal person. So I was kind of thinking that maybe I should look into Manipur a little bit more. And that's what led me to do something called the Manipur Field Trip in 2004. I was an advisor to a Rockefeller institution called the Asian Cultural Council, and I urged them to give me a grant to take some American artists to Manipur. I wanted to see Manipur through their eyes. In fact, I have a funny story. I have a Japanese American friend called Yoshiko Chuma, and I brought her here. She's a choreographer and a dance performer, and she has a dance company in New York, very avant-garde, very experimental. And I didn't tell her that Manipur had dance. I didn't tell her that Manipur had the Japanese soldiers coming here to fight. So she goes back, and I stayed behind because, I have to, put up new curtains for my mom and all that kind of stuff that all children do. I'm sure you do it when you come and visit your mother. You look after your parents to see what is missing and what can be improved. She goes back and tells this dance teacher, professor in NYU from India, she says, did you know that Manipur has dance? And the professor said, oh, what are you talking about, Yoshi? Of course it has dance. It has one of the 4 classical forms of dance in India. So she says, why didn't you tell me this, Somi? I said, well, I wanted to see dance through your eyes. I didn't want to put any preconceptions, which is a lesson I learned from the Flaherty Film Seminar discussions. I didn't want to put any preconceptions in your head. I wanted to have you experience dance. And what she did is what I'm really interested in. And that is when I put her in touch with a dance company here, run by a lady called Rase, Ariban Rase, who had a troupe of really high performing artists. They tour internationally right now and nationally. I was attending the rehearsals, and for the first time, these classically trained dancers were asked, do you like to wear your hair like this? Can you dance with music? Now, this is an experimental avant-garde performance artist from dancer from New York, from the East Village. You can't get more cutting edge than that in the world, right? And she posed questions to the dancers themselves. In a culture where classical forms are taught in a very strict manner, this is the way
Yeah.
you, this is the way you stand, this is the music you perform to, this is the way you wear your hair. And she was the first one who actually asked the dancers themselves, how do you feel about this? Are you comfortable wearing just a t-shirt? And the girls said, oh no, we have to wear a P and all that. Okay, can't you wear your P like this? Can you dance without rhythm? Can you dance without drumming? Can you dance without music? Now, these are all challenges to a Manipuri classical dancer, trained, highly trained in a canon that's been established for generations, in a very high art form, and translating it into a performance that is avant-garde, and which was presented, by the way, with projections on their bodies and all that, of footage from New York and footage from Europe, and short films, which were projected on their faces and their bodies. Before she left, she did a workshop, and she presented at Kalimai Temple at the Manto. Now that's the kind of interactivity of cultures, of taking what is the finest in New York, what is the finest by extension in the world, and what is the finest in new thinking about art forms, and putting it in juxtaposition with a highly insular culture that was not even visited by people at that time. This is 2004. And asking them to re-look at their own art forms in a way that they were not using to. So the juxtaposition of the highly avant-garde and cutting edge in the world with the very insular, very orthodox, very conventional, highly trained, um, highly elevated art form like Manipuri dance was something that was entrancing. Because at
Wow.
that time, that first time we came, Tamu Ibobi, who was the chief minister of Manipur at the time, we were the first group that came like this. And I got notes from the American ambassador saying, why are you taking these people to this dangerous place in Manipur? We were given armed escorts, 2
Yeah.
jeeps. Wherever we went, there was one in front and one in the back. There were no restaurants, there were no classic hotel, nothing at that point. And so that made me look at Manipur through the eyes of American artists. We had a museum curator, we had a theater director, this dancer, film producers, film directors coming in, and each of them did something. So I'm very much into getting people interact with Manipur, trying to bring out the best in Manipur, to meet with the best in the West, in the rest of the world, and see what happens. It's basically my planned return to Manipur is an extension of that. It's basically also an investigation into who I am and what does Manipur mean to me, and what does it mean to me that I've lived abroad for more than half my life, and I've done all my work over there, and I come here. Then how do I look at Manipur? How do I see what are the best things about Manipur that we can talk to? Can we conceive of a Manipur that can interact with the rest of the world on Manipuri terms? And for that, we have to know what Manipuri culture is, and that's what's leading me to conservation. And I'm very fortunate that I'm uniquely placed to do this because of Binodini, because of what she did with culture, what she did with conservation, what she did with dance, and what she did with literature and film. So I'm a very, very fortunate, blessed, and privileged person in that aspect. So it's been a wonderful journey that I'm still on. And every day I discover new things about Manipur that entrance me.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting, right? Like, I feel like seeing the footage of what you have, uh, shared. I think if it is like way back in 2004, like I can't imagine. Of course, like after that, you have done a lot of other experimental work. So yeah, I would love to see the footage of the performance in Kalimai Mandir.
Oh yes, they're all online. I will send you links.
Yeah. I didn't even know about that. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think also your vision and thought, right? How do we portray Manipur and to the rest of the world in Manipur's term, in our term? I love that.
And we
I
have
think
to
we
know
can go.
Manipur. We
Yes,
have to know Manipur.
for that you have to know Manipur.
Yeah, if you want to portray Manipur and tell people about Manipur, the first thing is that you have to know Manipur yourself. You have to investigate it yourself. Otherwise, how do you
So
know what to show the people?
Right. And many of us, who have gone out, like, we are Manipuri, we are Meitei, but, there are a lot of things we don't know.
That's right. And even here, I hang out with a lot of younger people around here. Many people have lost touch with many things I've discovered. Many young people who are now enjoying The Princess and the Political Agent. It went into second printing yesterday, by the way. It was sold out. The first printing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it is actually, if you go to Amazon.
That is great news.
It's wonderful news.
So the printing, like the paper print in Manipur, it's sold out?
Sold out.
Even
in the rest
that's
of India,
awesome.
they have to go into second printing because it's also sold to anyone in India, Amazon, India. So that is that speaks to a new popularization and a new framing and presentation of Binodini now in the minds of younger people who don't know her. I mean, she died almost 10 years ago now, and who have not read her work for whatever reason. Either they didn't read the Bangla script so well, or that they only read Mayek, or they kind of spent most of the time outside Manipur and were more comfortable in English or other languages. I mean, I studied Manipuri in Manipur when I was here, and I studied Bangla for another 8 years. I can read Bangla script quite well, except one gets rusty. I can't pick up a book and just enjoy it like a thriller, for instance, like reading the Da Vinci Code, just turn the pages one after the other. So one labors a little bit because one becomes rusty because you're not used to reading it so quickly. But so Binodini now has especially among young women, a huge following on Manipur. That somehow there was this Manipuri woman who did all this has been a source of great inspiration and pride for them. And I'm very happy to have been part of that process.
Yeah, definitely, right? I mean, all of us, we look for inspiration, and at her time, like, the words, what she had written, strength and courage and speaking up, like it reflects in the stories, what she has written. So when did you start the translation? And if you can share, a little bit about your experience throughout the work.
This particular translation, I started about 2 years ago. I named the book The Princess and the Political Agent, decades ago. I've been meaning to translate this, and my mother wanted me to translate it. And she said that some people had approached her, and she was always very careful about who she agreed to in terms of writing about her work or adapting her work or in her translation. There have been writers in Bangla, in Assamese, in Hindi, and other people who have approached her at various points saying, can we translate? And she's always turned them down. Even adaptations of her work, she was very, very professional as a writer. She won't even tell me many things about Sanatombi. What is fiction and what is historical? I said, no, this is not something I'm going to share. Of course, I can divine a few things from the conversations because I was involved in publishing the first edition in 1976. And all of a sudden,
wow. So this Meitei Lol, it was published in 1976? Wow.
My dates are always a little off, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, in the 70s. Okay.
Yeah. And so we decided on the cover, which was done by Thoidingjam Tombi, not this one, but another one, which is a very beautiful one of Cremation Fire. And at that point, she said, no pictures of Sanat Tombi in the book, because she's not fiction creation.
Okay.
But it's based on history and historical incident. But she will not tell, she didn't tell anyone which was history and which was her imagination and creation. In fact, one time she came to me, I said, what happened? And she says, my book was produced in court the other day as evidence in some dispute about land.
I
She
see.
said, they don't even know that my book is all fiction. I'm not going to be telling them. She says, that it's not her job, So the original book has little drawings that separate the chapters. It's a very forward modernist book, by the way. It's not just a historical story of novel that just kind of reads from A, B, C, D all the way to Z. It is a book that plays with literary form. It's a very highly literate piece of work. It's a work of literature. So there were no chapters in the book. We had to chapterize it for Penguin.
I see.
Because Penguin put this in after they saw the translation, they put it in modern classics, which is their division of writers like Rabindranath Tagore and Sarat Chandra Chatterjee. And so it's a very highly elevated pantheon. And this is the first book from Northeast India that is being recognized as a modern classic. But the modern classic also has a very strict form of presentation. So we had to chapterize it. My mother and I, we edited the book together with other people as well. And one of the things that we discussed a great deal, which again I revisited with my editors, I worked with 4 of them at Penguin, is the use of ellipses, of the ... dots. And she was very liberal with them. And she broke all conventional rules of punctuation. And my argument to Penguin is that it's a style. And they're saying, no, but in English you can't do this. I said, yeah, but this is a writer in Manipuri. We have to keep what she did. And there's a purpose behind all these ellipses. I did tell my mother, over here you're going a little too far by putting 15 dots. It can be like, like 6 or 9 or something. So we went back and forth in the production of this first edition, and that is the one that I'm using for this particular translation. And we added spaces. She's an artist with training from Kala Bhavan in Santiniketan, and she saw the page also in visual terms. So she separated paragraphs. She put extra spaces between lines. Sometimes she crunched up text together. There were many things that she was playing. It kind of reminded me of works like Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Sterne, which has blank pages in the middle, for instance. These are called graphic devices. And Binodini actually uses graphic devices in her book. So she's not an easy writer, and she demands that there's a reader's response. You have to keep track. You have to pay attention to the work. She's not going to make it easy for you. My favorite example that I said to someone the other day, which I can share with you, is that the first mention of Kongjong Lan, the Battle of Kongjong, in this book, Princess and Political Agent, is when Sanatombi is lying pretty much during her last days, and she's delirious from a fever, and she hears guns celebrating the start of the procession of Bor going to Hyantang from the palace. All the princesses all dressed up like she used to. And she's startled by the sound of gunfire, and she thinks that war has come. She thought the British were firing at them again. She was thinking about 1891. And she says, go get my uncle, go, run. She was raving, thinking that the war had come. And so the introduction of Kongjom Lan ends there. There's nothing more said about it until another couple of chapters of Kongjom Lan. So to jump forward to Kongjom Lan, to the Battle of Kongjom, or the Anglo-Manipuri War of 1891, she actually goes back into memory of the main character. And so it is kind of going back in order to go forward. And these are these time shifts and playing of literary devices, of writing devices that she undertook. Like, for instance, a friend of mine said to me, "Oh my God, Penguin has made a mistake. All the commas are missing in the last chapter." And I said, well, actually, they are not there because she was using a literary technique called stream of consciousness. We just go from word to idea without any break. So when she's lying in her deathbed, and all the images and sounds are coming back to her, there's a whole chunk, two whole chunks of prose without any full stops, periods, commas, nothing. It is just a stream of consciousness. That's because she liked the work of Virginia Woolf, who was experimenting with that in the early part of the 20th century. So, and that was also, interestingly, no one has mentioned this in various reviews and little reviews that have been coming out so far. That was also juxtaposed with Aribalom. So, in the middle of this, there is the song sung by the Pena player in Kanglei Thokpa, in the Kanglei Lai Haraba in Manipur, when when the king Nopok Ningthog is going in search of his bride and his love, and she says, "Isano ukidereko Isano," and this is a beautiful Pena ballad that she juxtaposed between these two texts of Virginia Woolf style stream of consciousness technique. She's an amazing writer.
That's awesome.
Ballads and stream of consciousness in the same chapter.
Yeah, stream of consciousness. I like that. I like the way you put it.
Actually, a literary term in criticism.
Yeah.
In literary theory. That's
stream
one
of consciousness.
Consciousness.
When you translated, right, like, can you share some of the maybe phases or words where you found it extremely difficult to find the, correct translation in English? Because sometimes I feel that, like, because the way we speak and it's so rich, I'm proud to say that I feel it's more rich than the English language. So it's always difficult to translate it. So, just your experience and having been translated 3 books, right? How do you, like, are you like 100% happy of the translation, or, did you still feel like, oh no, I did not do justice, in the translation of the emotions or the scene?
Like my mother, I will not divulge where I'm most dissatisfied. However, in all my translations, there are places. In fact, let me go back one thing. After living in the United States, in an English language speaking country for 33 years, my ear for the English language has changed. I spoke English every day for 33 years. And the music, the cadence, the character of spoken English, when you live in an English-speaking society, changes your appreciation and your knowledge and your feeling for the language. So when I read the translations that I did before I came to the United States, I feel like, oh no, I have to redo this because they're not wrong, Grammatically, they're absolutely fine. Punctuation, everything, the meaning and all that are as good as I can make it. But it sounds a little bit off. It's almost as if it's out of tune, a little bit. And it's a very fine feeling. And the other day, I got a call from a professor saying that they wanted to use my translation of a story I'd done before called Itamacha, which is still not published yet. in book form. And I said, oh, no, please don't do that, because I read it. I really want to redo this because it's, nothing is wrong with it in terms of the English language. But as English literature, which is what I'm working with literature at this point, not just a simple translation of this word or that term or this name or that name from one culture to the other. This is English and Manipuri and Japanese, I'm sure, and German. Each of these languages carries a little tone. There's a musicality almost. There's a rhythm. There's a certain way of saying things that are that have become part of me now, even though English is my second language. And so my feeling for English has changed after living in an English-speaking society for more than 3 decades. So that was one thing. The other thing is that each language is a window on the world, and it's a window, and it tells you how people think. Many words in any language are untranslatable into another.
Yeah.
The Japanese have a word for men who become fat after getting married. You don't have to go to the gym anymore. Wife is cooking delicious food. And they have a word for the weight that a man gains after 2 or 3 years of wedded bliss. It's called happy fat. It translates as happy fat. It's fat that comes out of contentment, for instance. They also have a word for books that you keep by your bedside that you intend to read, but you never read.
You never read.
Yeah. Manipuri also has so many words and concepts that are very hard to translate because they have to be not just translation of the word, but you're basically translating the culture. Like, I'll give a very easy example. Masigi nupisi rasi thani. What is rasi? It's a very difficult concept.
Yeah.
What is rasi? Is it charm? Is it beauty? Yes. Is it rhythm? Yes. Rasi thangadi tan kaiva yate. Rasi thangadi tokchava. These are all, very Manipuri specific ways of looking at the world. Like, for instance, I just wrote an essay, which I'll send you later, about Binodini's sense of beauty, because she has many descriptions of beauty in this book. It's a very it's a beautiful book about beauty also, about the beauty of money, landscape, of flowers, of women, of dress. I mean, there's of the men, the masculine beauty, all descriptions of beauty. So I wrote an essay about the Manipuri sense of beauty that I was seeing in this particular book, but also being reminded that I was told by Ichi Kamala, the singer, who was very close to my mother, that my mother's highest regard for aesthetics was called Machutaba. How do you... Masigi Nupamchasi Machutai Ko. Machutade Nang Tabaktabise. I mean, these are Machutaba is what? It's good manners, it's good ethics, it's beauty, it's balance, it's proportion, decency, good intent. So Machutaba is the highest form, and she actually wrote an essay about it, which I still haven't read, because there are so many things that I still need to find out about Binodini and her work. All about Machutaba is the concept of beauty, of the highest ideal of aesthetics. So, but how do we translate things like this? So that is the second point. Every translator is considered a traitor. In Italian, they call it traduttore, translator, traitor. Every translation is not up to the original. In fact, Borges was saying that the original betrays the translator. He turns it around. The translation, So But it is a dark and it's a lonely job that you're always getting criticized for, and there are reasons to criticize it. But Penguin Modern Classics also has different ways of doing things. I decided early on that I'm working on a work of literature. After reading the book again, I'm working on a work. I'm working with a work of literature. What I produce has to be literature, not simply a translation of a book of literary work, but
so it's not a word-to-word translation.
It has to also stand alone as a book of literature on its own, almost like a book of English literature, really. Because you read Murakami, and you love Murakami. Have you read the Japanese original? Will you ever read the Japanese original? We say Tolstoy is a great novel, but we're reading only the translation. So it is very important that we realize that the translation has to stand as a book by itself as well, because that's the one thing that most people are going to be reading without ever going back to the original.
That's true.
But the people who read the original say, oh no, that word should be like this, that word should be like that. And yes, they have a point. It could be like this and could be like that. But I decided early on as a work of literature that this book would not have a glossary. I'm not going to explain. This is not a thesis. This is a beautiful work of literature, and it has to read with the flow of prose as much as possible, like the one that Binodini herself wrote, because she was known for the beauty of her prose. She was not a scholar.
Yeah, so absolutely.
There's no annotation, there are no footnotes, there's no glossary. I'm not trying to be a cultural informant over here. What I'm working to is the literature of Binodini, and to make it and to make the translation also a work of literature as much as I can. And if the translation is not good enough, then it does more damage to the work, because people are going to be going judging this book. Boro Sahib's Ombi Sanatombi, I know very well, is going to be judged by many people simply on the basis of The Princess and the Political Agent. I'm working with someone else's book. It's a tremendous burden of responsibility. It's something that keeps me awake at night, has kept me awake at night for 2 years now. Like, what am I doing over here? It has to be done. It's so beautiful. How can I get this into English? And but having lived abroad, I think I have a little bit more confidence in doing this. Yeah, and then
all the first print is sold out.
And then the Penguin has his own classic style of doing things. You can't do this. We can't do that. You know? Like for instance, Kang Sanaba. How am I going to translate Kang? Kang Sanaba has connotations of budding romance. This is when girls and boys, they dress up and come together. There's a little bit of flirtation. Kang ibu the pizza de kedo lesabi fazabita fazikamu lanjalage Pakang says the girl doesn't like him so much. Pakang sakti bataki logjarage ko and like me, you know. So there's a lot of flirtation and courtship in Kang. It's a socially approved gathering for young boys and girls, like Thapal Chongwa is. So Sanatobi wants to play Kang. Am I going to start explaining what Kang is? No matter, you know. So I had to find, but Penguin style is to mention the first mention of the word should be italicized, and then because I decided not to use any glossaries or explanations, I say Kang court shuffleboard, and then from then on I dropped the word Kang because I've mentioned it. And subsequent references to it, I use just a shuffleboard thing, because the main thing is that you don't want to trip up readers as they're reading the book, having to and explaining to them all the different concepts, because as a Tibeto-Burman culture and as Tibeto-Burman language, we're very distant from an Indo-European language like English. So the distance of language and culture and the worldview and concepts of things like beauty and so on have to be kept in mind. At the same time, the reading has to be an enjoyable experience. It
Yeah,
has to be
definitely.
enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tamo, like, when you spoke about the cover, I didn't know about the history, but this one is not the original. There was
Not the, yeah.
okay. So when you chose for the translation, how did you think about the picture, what you put, in the cover page? Can you share a little bit on the context of,
I'm
yeah.
so happy you brought this up. It's a really good question. In fact, yesterday, I went to Kangla and presented the book as a prayer offering to Ibatau Pakhangba at the shrine. And His Highness Sanaja Lesemba was going to come, but he was flying off to Delhi for his swearing. But the Maharani came, Habi Mingon, Anamika was there, and her two children, their two children were there. So we made an offering there because, date, the 20th of July, when the two Kangla Sars in Kangla Fort were destroyed by the British. And I wanted to commemorate that. We should remember, there should be a bold letter day in our calendar. So we should know, as part of our general knowledge, that the Kangla Sa was destroyed on the 20th of July.
28th July.
In 1891. So the cover of the book has Kangla Sa in it. And the Kangla Sa is broken. And it's got blood on it. They killed the 5 British officers in 1891, including Mr. Grimwood. They smeared blood on the faces of the Kangla Sa as offering to Ngoibi, the goddess of war. It was fulfillment of prophecy that white heads would roll in front of the Kangla Sa one day in the Shekal Kumbaba. So the cover, which is, because the book is the few years before and after 1891, I requested them to put Kangla Sa on the cover, but about one that has already been broken, because we're talking about the breaking of Manipur and the transition from sovereignty into being part of the British Indian Empire, British Raj. So that transition is represented by the Kangla Sa being the symbol of Sanatomi's family. Kangla Sa was built by Maharaja Narsingh, in 1844. It's not that old, actually. It was only there for like 50 years before it got destroyed. So that represents the old transitioning to the new, and behind that, we have the Chongabon. And that is deliberately anachronistic, because when the novel ends, Chongabon had not been moved into, it was still under construction. But that represents the transition to the new order of things, representing the British and Churachan Maharaj. Because Churachan, the book is very interesting because Binodini's own father is a major character in the book. So the foreground picture of the Kangla Sa and the background picture of the palace, that's not the old palace. That's a new palace. So it's,
new one.
It is symbolic. It is not literal. It's a book of literature. It's a book of art. So it is a juxtaposition to combine the two periods that Manipur is going through. And behind that, we have the red sky, because we have a manuscript called Lechi Lone, where you read the skies, the color of the sky, the color of the shape of the clouds, to portend, to forecast whether there will be war coming, whether there will be famine, whether there's going to be good harvest. The Maichos of Manipur used to look at the sky and read the sky, and so we made the sky a blood red to show the arrival of war and bloodshed. Because the book is a pretty bloody book.
I knew that there would be a lot of thoughts and ideas which went into the cover, because I looked at it and I'm like, okay, what does the color mean? And, the Kanglasa, as you've seen, like it's kind of shattered and, blood. And yeah, so thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, my mother liked paintings as watercolors, and the penguin artist did a very good job, I thought of it. I like the cover that created you.
Yeah. Is it possible for you to do a small reading for us?
Yes. Now, I'll tell you what I want to read.
Yeah,
Can you
sure.
still see me? Okay. This is a thing that I've always wanted to read, but I've never had a chance to. And I feel that since we have an international audience over here, I wanted to read something about, which I think shows a very interesting thing about Binodini's sense of humor and her perception, the way she looked at things and observed things. Jane Austen was said to have gray eyes, and someone, I think it was F.R. Leavitt, the great critic of the writer of the great tradition, he said, gray eyes of a viper. It's a very sharp eye. I assure you, it's not easy being the son of a writer, huh? Because they see everything. They look at everything as that can be written about. I can see incidents from my life in Sanatan. So this is the way which I've not seen too many writers approach, and she's looking at the British through Sanatani's eyes. So they go to a party, a very extravagant party in a Chabagan, in a tea estate in Silchar, when Maxwell has been transferred there. And she takes Sanatan there, and she's miserable. She can't stand the heat. She doesn't like the noise. She was in a bad mood from the moment she got out of bed. Sanatan Maxwell said, "Oh, please, Sanatan, no, don't give me a hard time. Can you just relax?" And then, "Oh, I don't like this place. I don't like that place." So this is a party that she goes to. And I like this one because here you can see her looking at the foreigner. Sanatuli is looking at the foreigner. Binodini is looking at the foreigner. Okay? So they go to this party together. Right? So let me start. The preparations were remarkable. Sanatombi had seen many big dinners at the residency. She had seen them at other people's places too. But such extravagant brilliance, such extravagant waste, she had never seen. Wealthy people from the surrounding tea estates arrived, all dressed up. They came with many beautiful ladies, cleavage bared, in backless dresses, many tiny waisted white maidens. Everything was shiny. Sanatombi looked at the crowd as people entered one after the other. She sat quietly and watched. Maxwell would come now and then to look in on her. He would ask after her and then promptly go back to join the rest. They talked to one another a great deal, turning to the ladies, then turning to the men. They laughed loudly. They were having a great time. A beautiful white woman among them pealed with musical laughter, feigning surprise, feigning annoyance, feigning fright. Sanatobi continued to look at their show, at the fully attired white men. The women lifted narrow-stemmed glasses with drinks of many colors to lips as red as dayal fruit, and sipped at them delicately. Maxwell brought over an Indian woman in a sari, sat her down next to Sanatobi, and went off again. The woman was also an outsider like Sanatobi. Musical instruments started to play, wonderful instrumental music, airs from another land. The men and the women swayed to the music, one man with one woman, embracing each other in a dance. The ladies lowered their eyes, the men smiled. Sanatobi felt embarrassed. She had never seen men and women openly hold each other before. She turned her face to one side. She tried not to see. It would have been awful if the sari-clad woman had not been with her. I found a delight when I was translating it, because how women in cocktail parties, they feign surprise and fright, and the way they drink their wine, the way they hold each other in the dance. I mean, she saw all that because she used to go to a lot of parties in Shillong also.
Yeah, that's
Maharaj is
interesting.
really interesting because here you see the Manipuri perspective on the world here.
Yeah,
Usually the world is looking at Manipur, right? And here she's looking at
yeah,
the white people, the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they dance. Otherwise, usually it's the dominant, more powerful West looking at small places like Manipur, right? But here
yeah.
she's turned it around and she's looking at people, which I thought was quite delightful.
Yeah, I know. That's why we need more books, more literature, more, like explanation from our view, from our perspective. That's awesome. Yeah, and also while you were reading, Tamo, I heard the bells of the temple.
Yes, I have 3 temples around me.
Yeah, and it's almost like,
Birds and temples, and it's
it's
wonderful. It's wonderful.
yeah,
I
it's
can
almost
hear
like the reading has been blessed. When
yes,
I heard the sound when you were reading, I'm going like with the adu feeling like I'm All right. So, is there anything else I missed which you want to share about the book?
well, I just, I hope that people like it, enjoy it, and I'd love to get feedback, good or bad, doesn't really matter. What we need in Manipur, which I've noticed, because I come out of cultural curating and presenting exhibitions, is that we need more criticism. Not criticism saying this is wrong or this is bad or this should be
Yeah.
like that, but real criticism. Like I went to a play by Thamur Ratan Thiam one time, and I was very surprised that there was no review of his play the next day.
Mm.
You know, like there's a Maharaj happening. I went there. There was no review of the Maharaj. It should be a dance review. So even book criticism, it's the little that I read is like say, oh, this is wrong, this is right, you should be written like that, this and that. But criticism has to be literary criticism because it's a work of literature. So you do have to know something about literature, right? So
Right.
I would like to get feedback, even if it's just saying this is wrong or whatever, which is fine, like I read, so like tayal fruit. What is tayal fruit? I'm not going to give the
Mm.
biological name of tayal. The fact that it's a fruit and it's red, it's
Yeah.
enough. So one has to look at it as literature, and I hope people enjoy it as literature, because I do think, and I really mean this quite seriously, that I think that it's a work of world literature. I'm not saying this because it's my mother or this is a Manipuri book that we are very proud of as a good writer, but this is really a book that can be put on a bookshelf with great works of world literature. And I think I'm very proud of my mother. I hope people like the translation. I know it's always inadequate. All translations are. Maybe a better one can will come one day, and I do hope that this will inspire people to do more translation. Um, even if like there's so many works that need to be translated. So wannabe translators who are interested in the way I've translated and the challenges that one faces. I would like to see them translate other work as well, whether it's by Jaming Ananghal or so many writers out there whose
Yes.
works. I mean, your mother has been reading so much of the Manipuri literature.
Yes,
Okay.
it's so amazing. I feel so ashamed that I have not read some of the work. And, when you hear the story, like it really, really depicts, right, brings out the human condition, like of places which I have never been, or the description or the emotions between a hill woman and a Maitai woman. And, in one of the show when Imam was telling the story, I cried. That's
Whose
what
story?
literature does, right?
Which story is
Khaidem Pramodini.
Yeah.
When I heard as my mother was reading, I was like, oh my God. I'm so ashamed, right? I have never read her work.
Yeah.
And you're right, we need to translate that. I mean, it's really nice that we got to hear about it, in Meitei Lol. And
Right.
I really love it. Like, it was a story about her going to the hills and, her relation and her feelings um, with a tribal woman whom she felt like a mother, but all unspoken because she couldn't understand her language. But it was like so beautifully put, and I was like, wow, that is the power of literature, right?
It is. And also, I hope that there'll be more translation of other literatures into
Yeah,
Manipuri, so that our culture also gets enriched. There used to be a lot of translation from Bangla, for instance, back until
yeah,
the 1950s and 60s. But I think that is, we need more translation of work being written out there. So I think so that the enrichment should be two ways. We are enriching world literature by translating uh, into English, but I think other literatures should also be translated here to enrich our ideas because there are the windows are all open for culture. The winds have to go
yeah.
through all the open windows, as Tagore said, right? So I think that is. I hope that translation itself, if since people are talking about the translation, that I hope that this process is given more importance, both outside and inside. And I think it's really important to have it both ways, and then we can do more with this work as we move forward, which I plan to. That is
Yeah,
my
that's
mission in
awesome.
coming back to Manipur is to build a legacy.
Yeah, I'm so glad that, you are putting your time and energy, which is truly a gift for all of us, to be reading about, things which we wouldn't have read. So I know we are at time, but I want to take a couple more of your minutes of one of the project I'm doing. So I'm doing a project called 1001 Thagachari. My intent is to, spread the practice of saying thank you. It's a gratitude project for Manipur. It's a way to enhance, amongst all of us to appreciate each other, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so I would want to invite Tamo to be a part of it by sharing your gratitude for somebody around you, and more specifically, I'm looking for someone you appreciate at the level of Manipur.
The other day, I went and met a friend of mine um, in Kaching, and he's one of the most extraordinary people that I have met. And he has created a museum and has done work with manuscripts. And his name is Mayang Lambam Gavachandra. And he has an amazing collection of manuscripts of puyas. He's written on medicinal plants and his translated work. He gave me a book on Kaching Lai Harauba, which is different from Kanglai Harauba in Impal, for instance. And he does amazing work. I mean, here, unsung uh, and known to only very few people. And
Yeah.
I'm writing a book now. I have another book coming out, and I wanted something from Kaching. So I went and met with him, and the man is an amazing man. Can I give two? Can I give two?
Yes,
Thagacharis?
sure, you can. I am telling you, like, I went to Imaketel and I asked people for Thagachari, and some people said Thagalaroi, but I'm so happy. Tamo is like, no, I want to, nominate
No,
more
no.
people.
The other one,
Awesome.
the other one, I'm sorry, has passed away recently, and we became friends. He was much older than me, and his name is Khoraijan Dhiren.
Hmm.
And Khoraijan Dhiren was the head of the agriculture department in Manipur. And all the rice that we eat today, what we call KD rice, is Khoraijan Dhiren rice. And he created
Hmm.
disease resistant, fungus resistant, higher yielding Manipuri versions of rice. He collected, I think, more than 275 varieties of rice in his lifetime.
Wow. Yeah.
All the Sanapo and Tolbipo, all these are KD's hybrids that he created
Creation.
as an agricultural scientist.
Yeah.
Amazing. And also, what a gentleman. I invited him to lunch once, and he came dressed in his blazing white pajama, his pumyat, piyal, jandal, and tindana. We just had dinner together with my mother. And his family is very close to the palace also. But I feel that these are people who are doing amazing things in Manipur, that
Yeah.
who have done amazing things, that I think we need to appreciate them more. We
Yes.
should be actually, uh, I don't know, we have to recognize them, not by giving awards so much, awards are also nice, but in our own minds, we should know who these people are and what they have done. And I think
Yes.
whether it's Manipuri rice or whether it is a museum of farming implements in Kaching that Bhagavat Chandra has created, for instance, these are people are doing amazing things in Manipur. I can I can give you many thagacharis. I can give you a
Yeah, no,
dozen.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I think my intent is, for us to have that conversation and for our youth to know, right, who is who. Because, like you said, there are a lot of people who are
Agree.
doing so good, but nobody knows.
No, we have to appreciate the work that other people do, um, that people among us do, because we need role models more than anything.
Yes,
Manipuris, especially of younger generations, they need role models. We need to say, like, okay, this is someone like me, someone like my mother has achieved this much, and I can be like this too. We need
yeah,
inspiring role models. And for me, the curating work that Mayank Lambam Gaurachandra is doing in Kaching is not inferior to anything I've seen in New York in terms of the
absolutely.
creative eye, the imagination, the connections. And is working with rural Manipur at this point. We need to appreciate each other a lot more because as an insular country, we tend to drag each other down a little bit more than appreciate
Yes,
each other.
that's
And I
exactly. Yeah, I think so.
appreciate each other because the world is not a zero-sum game. This is always a win-win. You know, I can help you, you can help me. I can give you ideas. You can give me your ideas. It's a back and forth, and that's how culture is enriched. Instead of trying to contain people within your own existing understanding of Manipur, it's kind of important to let Manipuri culture grow at this point. As a conservationist, that is what it's all about. It's about growth and development for the future. It's not about putting stuff behind a glass cabinet and saying this is what culture was or this is what this artifact represents. It has to mean something for people's lives. And your Thagachari project, picking out people that you admire, they don't even have to be really famous, but
Yeah.
it's very
But we
important
can
that
make them, right? See, the thing is, like, if we are not talking about it, how would we know, right? Like how you're saying that the work of the Manipuris are not inferior. When as part of the Thagachari, I went to Three Mothers Art Gallery. I don't know if Tamu has gone,
no, I have
and
not.
it was, yeah. So it's in Imphal, and the artist, he passed away. And see how the world works, right? I was not even meant to interview him. I just wanted to go to the art gallery because one of our listener had guided me to go over there, and I went over there, and it is all sculpture made out of Ura na
Nice.
thaba sculpture mein amneva.
Mm.
And when I went there, the artist was actually not feeling that well, and somehow it happened that I took the interview for him. And then even before I released, he passed away. But
Ah,
when I saw his art, and when I go right here in Washington, D.C., and I see Urana Saba like sculpture, I the world works, right? I was not even meant to interview him. I just wanted to go to the art gallery because one of our